Hey, guys, tonight we're heading way back to the most chaotic, clattering, and donkey-clogged streets of ancient Rome. Imagine this. It's sunrise, and you're already ankle-deep in mystery puddles. Someone's yelling in Latin carts are screeching past with wooden wheels that really should have been replaced, and a market woman is chasing a chicken that absolutely refuses to be sold. This is your morning commute, and no, there's no Uber chariot on the way. The city's already alive, and so is the chaos. The sun slinks upward over the rust-red roofs of Rome, dappling cracked cobblestones with sleepy light. But you're too busy sidestepping a steaming pile of something to notice the view. There's a man shouting about figs and others selling amphorae out of a cart that somehow takes up half the road, and a mule with a vendetta that's just sneezed directly into your sleeve. You sigh deeply. This is traffic Roman style. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is, especially if you're in a time zone where you really should be asleep. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward past the tabernae, those bustling street-front shops with fabric awnings flapping in the breeze. Everything smells like baking bread fish brine and someone's forgotten laundry. Rome in the 1st century isn't a place for gentle strolls. It's full-contact walking, your destination, nowhere special. But in a city like this, getting nowhere takes serious effort. You pause near a crumbling statue of Mercury, patron god of travelers, though his track record for traffic safety is debatable, and glance both ways before crossing a stone-paved lane. Ha! You thought crosswalks were a modern invention. Technically, Rome had stepping stone crossings raised high enough that you didn't have to step in street muck, but they weren't exactly zebra-striped safety zones. More like, try your luck, citizen. A delivery man lumbers past arms full of ceramic jugs sloshing with olive oil. A trio of teenage boys pushes a squeaky cart full of turnips uphill sideways. And in the middle of it all, you. Just one more body trying to get through the day without being trampled by a runaway ox. Historians still argue whether Rome's early traffic problem was a design flaw or just an unavoidable consequence of growth. But what's certain is that city planning was more about monumental drama than pedestrian comfort. Temples huge, forums sprawling, road rules, optional. Your sandal snags on a rut. That's right. Those grooves worn into stone roads weren't accidental. Over time, the constant passage of wheels etched permanent tracks into the stone, forcing carts to stick to predetermined grooves. If your axle didn't fit the rut well, tough. And in the midst of all this here, you are caught between a barrel of fermented fish sauce and a barking dog wearing a floral garland. It's unclear if he's a pet or a priest. Either way, he smells like incense and anchovies. The crowd begins to thicken as you near the Forumborium, the bustling cattle market near the Tiber. You step aside just in time to avoid a stampede of sheep, followed by a priest muttering something about sacrifices and tax receipts. You glance up and see a street sign carved into the wall, Subura, one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in the city, known for its brothels, bars, and the kind of gossip that can bring down emperors, also known for its very bad traffic. You're not surprised. An open wagon lurches into view, driven by a man who looks like he hasn't slept since Saturnalia. His cart is overloaded with amphorae, all stacked like a game of drunken Jenga. He bellows at a fruit vendor blocking the way. The vendor shrugs and continues arranging peaches into a pyramid. Neither moves. Rome, ladies and gentlemen. You're now part of the gridlock, a human knot of bodies, beasts, and wheels. The kind of ancient traffic jam that makes you wonder why people still romanticize this era. There's something oddly soothing about it, though, like a very chaotic lullaby. A local historian, yes, even back then, once wrote that the streets of Rome were more dangerous than the battlefields of Gaul. Given that you've nearly been head-butted by a goat, run over by a bread cart, and elbowed by a senator's bodyguard, you believe it. The street hums with life. Pickpockets move like fish in water, while toothless fortune-tellers whisper secrets for a coin. A dog barks an iambic pentameter. Probably, somewhere nearby, a man is giving a passionate speech to absolutely no one. He stands on a broken column toga, flapping in the breeze like a forgotten sail, and declares that carts should only move clockwise through the city center. No one listens, of course. But remember him, his madness might just plant a seed. In the background, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer joins the groaning of wooden wheels. You duck into a shaded portico to rest grateful for the brief escape from the sun. A woman sits nearby, fanning herself with a woven palm frond. Traffic, she mutters, always worse after the Ides. You nod sympathetically, though you're not entirely sure what that means. Back in the street, a small parade of priests passes, carrying gilded statues of Jupiter on litters. They chant, they swing incense, they ignore absolutely every rule of road etiquette. Behind them, a fishmonger mutters curses and tries to maneuver around the divine procession without tipping over his barrel. Quirky fact: the Romans sometimes used urine collected from public urinals. Yes, they had those to clean their laundry. Not really related to traffic, but hey, it's a good reason to avoid stepping in puddles. You trudge forward. The streets narrow, the noise intensifies, and the smell becomes a mix of rosemary sweat and, is that cheese? You pass under an arch bearing a faded inscription. It's hard to read, but it says something about order in the streets. A joke, clearly. Suddenly, there's a clearing, a little plaza with a round fountain in the center. You blink. The crowd bends around it naturally, almost as if, dare we say, traffic is flowing. Briefly, like a dream, a primitive roundabout. Not quite, but close enough to whisper the idea into history's ear. You pause here, letting the warm stone bench cradle your weary legs. The fountain gurgles, and a pigeon perches nearby, tilting its head like it knows something you don't. And maybe it does. You look back at the chaos from which you emerged. And somewhere deep in that Roman chaos between the senators, the sardines, and the spinning ox carts, you begin to understand why someone someday might try to fix this mess with a circle. You don't realize it at first, but you've made a tactical error by entering the Forum Boreum during peak delivery hour. You're not just a pedestrian anymore. You're an unwilling participant in a multi-species obstacle course where livestock senators and sacks of barley all compete for a square foot of cobblestone. A donkey brays somewhere to your left, loud, abrupt, and aggressively personal. You turn and find yourself nose to muzzle with the culprit, a gray-faced beast chewing thoughtfully on someone's toga fringe. The man being chewed on doesn't seem to notice. He's too busy arguing with another man over the price of salted sturgeon. commerce in Rome waits for no animal nibbling. The Forum. Boreum, nestled near the Tiber's eastern bend, is less marketplace and more barely contained mayhem. This was once the oldest forum in Rome, where Etruscan kings oversaw trade and grain deals. Now, it's where carts double park next to temples, and priests yell at butchers for blocking temple stairs with pig carcasses. You sidestep a very slippery-looking patch of goose droppings and keep moving. In this section of the city, roads converge in weird angles, because planning wasn't exactly the Romans' top priority early on. They built around hills, temples, and legends, not traffic patterns. What you get is the ancient equivalent of Spaghetti Junction, minus any signage. Just intuition fury and the occasional cursing noblewoman. Historians still argue whether the chaotic layout was inherited from older Etruscan roots or created entirely by Rome's swelling ego. Either way, it wasn't built for mass movement. And today, it shows. A barrel rolls past your feet. You jump back. It's chased by a very concerned young man, flapping his arms and shouting something about garum, that infamous Roman fish sauce, so pungent it was banned from apartment buildings. You let him pass. He looks like he's having a rough enough morning without you adding to it. You find a patch of shade near the Temple of Hercules Victor, its elegant circular columns half wrapped in ivy. Two soldiers stand nearby, eating dates and watching the crowd like bored lifeguards at a very dangerous pool. They occasionally step forward to push carts into line or glare at teenagers racing pigs for coin. And still, the traffic pulses forward sideways back again. You marvel at the city's determination to move despite itself. This isn't traffic flow. It's traffic defiance. A courier whips past toga tied up around his knees, scroll bag slapping against his hip. He's cursing the guy in front of him who's blocking the way by trying to parallel park a chariot. That's right. Roman drivers parked like modern ones, badly and with misplaced confidence. There are no lines, just vibes. You squeeze through a tight alley where two carts have met face to face, their drivers locked in a silent, sweaty standoff. Neither budges. You edge between them with the grace of a cat burglar clutching your tunic, as if it might protect you from getting wedged. Halfway through, you hear one of them mutter, "By Jupiter's sandals, not again." There were traffic laws, by the way. Julius Caesar himself tried to clean things up by banning wheeled vehicles from entering the city during daylight hours, except for construction, religious purposes, or emergencies, of course. So naturally, everyone claimed emergency status. It was like putting up a no parking sign and watching the entire neighborhood ignore it with style. And yet, that law stuck for years. Night became the legal window for carts and wagons, which meant Roman nights were filled with squeaky axles, donkey arguments, and sleep-deprived vendors trying to beat the sunrise. You can picture it, can't you? Oil lamps flickering in the alleyways, silhouettes of wheels creaking past narrow tenements, someone shouting, "Make way" in Latin at 3 a.m. Welcome to Rome, where silent nights are mostly aspirational. Quirky fact, Rome's wealthier citizens sometimes paid men to walk in front of their carts at night, holding torches and yelling at people to get out of the way, basically ancient high-beam headlights and honking combined into one underpaid guy with a bad lantern. You emerge from the alley onto a wider street and immediately get bumped by a man carrying a very upset goose in a basket. He doesn't stop. The goose hisses. You do your best not to take it personally. To your right, a large clay tablet hangs on a wall, listing restricted delivery hours and traffic rules. The writing's so faded, it's practically decorative. No one's looking at it. A stray dog lifts a leg nearby in quiet commentary. You begin to understand why a roundabout might have felt like a revelation. Anything that could bring order to this blessed mess. You stroll past a line of public fountains, the Nymphaea, where locals fill clay jars and gossip. One old woman claims a general is about to outlaw carts entirely. Another swears the emperor himself was nearly run down by a runaway cheese cart. No one checks the facts. Gossip flows faster than water. Your feet ache. Roman paving stones are flat but irregular, and every few steps you land wrong. You pass a cart, broken on one side. Its axle cracked from a rut so deep it looks like a canyon for ants. The owner sits nearby, eating bread, and glaring at the wheel like it betrayed him personally. Mainstream historical fact: the average Roman road was designed to last. Layers of stone, gravel, and volcanic sand made them durable. Some still exist today, but they weren't built for comfort, especially not when every third vehicle was overloaded with amphorite bricks or ego. You rest briefly under the portico of a fishmonger's shop. A chalkboard out front advertises freshest mullet this side of the forum. Behind the shop, you hear someone arguing over delivery timing. Something about a crate arriving late because a pig parade blocked the main artery near the Aventine Hill. As excuses go, it's very on brand. You decide to keep walking. There's something hypnotic about the movement here. The crowd flows in irregular waves, stop, surge, halt, shuffle. It's like the city breathes in slow-motion chaos. You nearly trip over a small boy selling figs out of a cracked basket. He grins, missing 2 teeth, and offers you one for a denarius. You decline, not because you dislike figs, but because the last one he sold had suspicious bite marks. Still, he might have the city's best traffic awareness. He darts between legs and carts like he's part hummingbird. You start to notice patterns. That butcher always parks near the bathhouse. That priest always yells when someone touches the sacred steps. That drunk senator, yes, again is asleep near the same statue every afternoon. Rome may be messy, but it's a predictable mess. A rotating pattern of familiar absurdity, which, of course, brings you back to that small plaza from before the one with the fountain in the middle. The more you think about it, the more it starts to make sense. Carts naturally moved around it. People adjusted. The traffic there didn't freeze or crash. It flowed. Not perfectly, but better than the rest of the city. Historians still argue whether that was the moment, the flicker of genius that sparked the earliest inklings of controlled circular traffic. Was it a happy accident, a priest's clever design, or just one spot where the chickens weren't feeling chaotic? You'll never know. But as you step into another crowd, hear another frustrated shout, and watch another cart back into a vegetable stall, you find yourself craving the whisper of a curve in the road, a circle, a loop, a roundabout, maybe next time. You've barely escaped the vegetable stall fiasco when the crowd thins just enough to breathe barely. The street winds toward a quieter district, though quiet in Rome simply means fewer people actively screaming about lentils. Here, the homes are larger. Balconies loom overhead draped with drying laundry caged birds, and the occasional bored noble tossing olive pits onto pedestrians. A pit narrowly misses your head. You glance up to see a teenager shrug unapologetically, then vanish behind a curtain. Roman hospitality. You shuffle along the edge of the street, staying out of the way of a goat-drawn cart, a rare but very real thing. It creaks past with a proud merchant, standing tall in the back arms, crossed like a conquering general. The goat looks less confident. At a nearby corner, an elderly man in a robe, the color of old papyrus, stands atop a box, waving his arms like an exorcist. One-way streets, he cries, a miracle from Mercury. You stop. Others stop. Is he mad? Almost certainly. Is he wrong? That's harder to say. You sidle closer. His proposal eastbound in the morning. Westbound at dusk, turn only at marked intersections. A few people nod politely, but most drift away to buy fruit or avoid eye contact. Still, you stay. Something about this has the spark of sense. Here's the thing. Rome had traffic laws, but they were inconsistent and widely ignored. Caesar tried banning wheeled traffic during daylight to reduce noise and chaos, but enforcement was spotty, and the exceptions endless. Religious processions allowed. Government wagons allowed. Rich guy claiming divine purpose allowed. You, however, aren't allowed to stop walking for long before someone bumps you. A fish seller grumbles as he jostles past a basket of eels sloshing at his side. You apologize. The eel stares at you, unblinking. Historians still argue whether Julius Caesar's restrictions worked or backfired. Some claim night deliveries worsened the city's sleep and safety. Others say it was the only thing keeping the streets remotely passable. What's clear is that Romans hated being told where and when to drive. You press onward toward a crossroads with stone stelae marking directions. They look more decorative than functional, each one chipped mossy and pointing in conflicting directions. One helpfully says, "This way." Another just reads, "Avoid." You choose to avoid. A chariot barrels through the intersection hornless but loud. The driver shouts warnings, curses, and what you're pretty sure is a sales pitch for pine resin. You flatten yourself against a column as it passes. The wake of dust tastes like regret. You find yourself beside a line of low boundary stones sippy that supposedly mark legal traffic zones, but enforcement almost none. A man pushing a giant jar of pickled onions simply walks over them like they're decoration. You sigh. So much for civic order. Still, the idea of organizing the flow sticks with you. A one-way street system, for example, would reduce collisions, confusion, and chariot side-eye. But who would enforce it? Who would explain it? More importantly, who would follow it? Quirky fact. One of the earliest surviving Roman jokes comes from a graffiti wall in Pompeii and reads essentially, "I was here. First move your cart, idiot." Even their humor had gridlock. A narrow alley up ahead seems quieter. You turn, stepping over a sleeping dog, and find yourself suddenly in a different world. Fewer carts, more pedestrians. Young students reciting poetry near a fountain. An old couple sharing dried dates under a cypress tree. A brief exhale. But peace is relative. A man approaches, robes flapping. "You look like a reasonable citizen," he says. You don't, but you let him continue. What if every road had directional markers, maybe colored stones for left or right turns? You raise an eyebrow. I mean, not colored paint's expensive. Maybe shape-coded. Square for left, triangle for right. You see, you do not see. But he's trying. And trying counts for something in Rome. You wish him luck and move on. Thoughts swirling with ideas you never expected to entertain arrows on pavement-timed travel windows. Laws people respected. Madness. You pass a bakery. Warm air carries the smell of flatbread and figs. A boy darts out carrying a tray of honey cakes, nearly colliding with a senator's servant. Both freeze. Then, with an unspoken agreement that can only come from long practice, they step around each other in perfect synchrony. A dance born of necessity. There's a rhythm to it, you realize. A language of movement that Rome never codified but somehow lived. You start to see it in patterns. Vendors arrange stalls with instinctive spacing. Carts naturally queue near the temple steps. People turn corners the same way year after year. Maybe that's what traffic planning really is, noticing the patterns and building around them. Or at least pretending you're in charge of what people are going to do anyway. You come upon a stretch of road pocked with deep wheel ruts, so deep they nearly guide your steps. Roman carts didn't have standardized axles, but many were close enough that their wear patterns became permanent grooves in stone. They weren't meant to be lanes, but they functioned like them. This, more than laws or proclamations, shaped Rome's daily flow. If your cart didn't match the rut, you bounced. If it did, you slid along like water in a channel. Low-tech automation. Mainstream historical fact. These ruts have been studied by archaeologists to reconstruct traffic patterns, cart dimensions, and even trade routes. Ancient traffic data preserved in stone. You pause at a well. A pair of women gossip nearby, their water jars balanced expertly. One mentions her brother, a cart driver, who swears someone's planning to create painted lanes near the Palatine Hill. The other scoffs. In this dust, they'll vanish by breakfast. You don't disagree. Still, someone somewhere is always trying to improve things, especially when tired of being late, stepped on, or shouted at by goats. The sun climbs higher. Shadows shrink. The heat rises from the stone in waves. You find yourself retreating toward another fountain, hoping the splash will cool your thoughts. A man nearby is sketching something in charcoal on papyrus, a grid, a few circles, some arrows. You lean in. Traffic, he says. Just an idea. You nod. Round paths, he adds, might ease the pressure. Let motion guide itself. The circle again. It lingers. A shape that returns to itself. A way to move without crashing. You sip the fountain water warm but sweet, and wonder if he's on to something. Somewhere in the distance, a vendor drops a crate. It cracks open, dried beans everywhere. People groan. Someone shouts. A donkey sits down in protest. You smile. It's just another Roman day. But maybe, just maybe, it doesn't have to stay this way forever. The noise changes before you hear it. Your ears detect the shift before your brain catches up. Gone is the chaotic shouting of the forum. In its place, the clatter of wheels, but rhythmic this time. Steady. Predictable. You follow the sound like a sleepy moth drawn to firelight. You've reached the Via Appia, the queen of Roman roads. It stretches from Rome to Brindisi, slicing through the countryside like a stone ribbon. And here within the city limits it doubles as one of the busiest and most unforgiving thoroughfares you've seen all day. You hesitate before stepping onto it. The surface looks deceptively smooth, paved with massive stone slabs. But the grooves, deep, unrelenting ruts make it feel like walking across the ribs of a stone beast. Your sandals catch, your ankles protest. But forward is the only way now. Chariots whip past you with mechanical precision, following the grooves, like they're locked on invisible rails. It's hypnotic and terrifying. This wasn't accidental. Over time, thousands of carts wore those wheel ruts into the stone, creating rigid tracks that funneled traffic into strict lanes, regardless of whether anyone actually planned it. In some ways, the grooves are the city's first traffic enforcers. You follow the path, or you bounce like a dropped amphora. Mainstream historical fact. Roman roads were built in layers compact, earth, crushed stone gravel, and then fitted paving stones. They were so well constructed that fragments still carry foot traffic today, 20 centuries later. But comfort, not a design priority. You pause at a fork. One path rises gently toward the Palatine Hill. Another dips toward the Circus Maximus. Between them, a vendor squats with a pile of battered wheels. He looks up and squints. "Need a spare?" he asks. "Axle too wide, got one that fits the Appia groove, perfect." You shake your head, but file the info away. Apparently, even then, someone was always selling car parts. The sun glares off polished stone, forcing you to shield your eyes. A breeze kicks up dust. Somewhere nearby, a cart's wheel squeals like an angry piglet. You're amazed they don't crash more often, and yet they don't. Not really. The ruts, worn into alignment, almost guarantee a collision-free flow, at least on the Appia. Once you're in the groove, you're committed. Turning is impossible. Backing out, laughable. The road demands obedience. No space for free spirits here. You step to the side and watch. A long line of carts advances like a parade, their drivers calm, focused, resigned. You spot a soldier eating raisins from a helmet, a merchant counting coins, a teenager asleep against a sack of flour. No honking, no shouting, just steady, rut-following movement. You begin to understand something vital. There is such a thing as too straight, too rigid. Traffic here moves, yes, but not gracefully. You sense tension beneath the order. One broken wheel, one stubborn mule, and this whole line would buckle like a snapped reed. Historians still argues whether the deep ruts were deliberately reinforced to guide traffic or simply worn in by repetition. Either way, they're here, and they're powerful. You turn off the road following a quieter side path, your feet grateful for softer ground. This part of the city has more gardens, more birdsong, fewer wheels. You pass under an arbor of creeping vines where two boys play dice. One rolls a 6, screams in victory, and then immediately trips over a stone with a wheel groove carved into it. Even here the roads leave their mark. You follow the sound of music, a lyre maybe, or a flute, and stumble upon a shaded courtyard. A man sits cross-legged sketching on a wax tablet. You peer over his shoulder and see a wheel, then another, then a spiraling pattern that looks suspiciously circular. Traffic, he says, without looking up. It wants to flow, not fight. You blink. Lines jam, but curves welcome. You offer a nod of cautious agreement. Then he adds, "It's how water moves." Quirky. In fact, some early Roman aqueduct engineers believed that curved pipes helped water flow faster. The science was iffy, but the metaphor, timeless. You leave the courtyard and wander through a neighborhood where the streets curve slightly, an oddity in Rome's mostly straight grid. And, wouldn't you know it, traffic here does seem gentler. Carts hug corners rather than wedge into deadlocks. Pedestrians step aside with ease. One woman even smiles. You pass a family unloading figs. The father whistles a tune. The mother arranges fruit with geometric care. A child draws circles in the dust with a stick. The circle again. Always the circle. You find yourself looping back toward the Appia, but from a new angle. The curve gives you space to see things cart paths, merchant stalls, even people's habits. The straight road cut through. The curve wraps around. At a corner, you pause at a shrine. Offerings clutter the base flower's coins, a small figurine of a wheel. You chuckle. A wheel, of course. Suddenly, the crowd thickens again. But this time, something's different. They're moving together. Still packed, still noisy, but in a rhythm. You realize you've stumbled onto a makeshift loop cart swirling around a round fountain, pedestrians weaving between. It's not official. There's no name for it. But you see it. A roundabout. A primitive one, perhaps. No signs. No arrows. But the intent is clear. The curve manages what corners cannot. It absorbs movement, redirects, it smooths the sharp edges of motion. One driver waves to another before merging. A donkey brays but doesn't panic. A child sits at the edge, drawing another circle in the dust. You sit and watch. For a moment, the chaos of Rome softens into choreography. No one planned this, but someone will. Someday, someone will see this moment, this motion, and realize it works, and then they'll build it on purpose. You're back on your feet, trailing the curve of that impromptu roundabout, like a curious beetle circling a drop of honey. Something about it sticks with you, how traffic didn't snarl, didn't snort in protest. It simply yielded, adjusted, moved on. You wonder if anyone else noticed. Probably not the man you just passed shouting at his donkey. Or the fish vendor hauling a crate that smells like Neptune's gym socks. Or the two women arguing over olive prices so loudly they spook a flock of pigeons off a nearby roof. But someone did. A man named Augustus. Well, Gaius Octavius Thurinus, if you want to be formal about it. He noticed a lot of things, particularly about how Rome was threatening to collapse under its own disorganized mass. You wander into a quieter section of the city, toward the Campus Martius, and find a shaded bench under a withered fig tree. It's where scholars say Augustus often walked scheming urban improvements between campaigns of conquest and dinner with senators. Here, he could see Rome's sprawl firsthand and smell it too. The emperor may have been a warlord, but he was also a bureaucratic, neat freak. When he wasn't reforming taxation or overhauling military pay, he tackled Rome's physical problems. Traffic was near the top of that list. Mainstream historical fact. Augustus issued sweeping reforms to Rome's infrastructure, including stricter laws about cart movement, designated zones for delivery, and even nighttime restrictions to minimize daytime noise. He was the first to push for something resembling civic flow. You stroll through the porticus of Octavia, where the columns still shimmer in the late afternoon light. Nearby, two scribes argue over the interpretation of a city edict. He meant turn left at the fountain, one insists. Left was metaphorical, the other snaps. Even here, even now, the battle for directional clarity rages. You take a detour through a covered alley, where wall paintings show scenes of the city, grand forums, processions, and tucked in a corner, what looks suspiciously like a cart navigating a circular plaza. Coincidence? Maybe. But it confirms something: the idea of flowing traffic was starting to slip into public consciousness. Of course, Rome wasn't about to leap straight into roundabouts and yield signs. They needed warm-up ideas, transitional tools, like assigning traffic times to certain professions. Augustus mandated that carts could only enter the city during specific hours, usually late at night or early morning. The result? The daytime streets became quieter, cleaner, and safer. Temporarily. because if you give Romans a rule, they'll find 47 clever ways to break it. Quirky fact: wealthy Romans began declaring their cargo divinely urgent to gain exceptions from cart restrictions. Some claimed their shipments were temple offerings. One reportedly disguised olive oil as holy anointment fluid. Divine logistics loophole. Still, some improvements stuck. The Senate started discussing better signage. They even toyed with the idea of designated entry and exit lanes. Imagine that controlled entry into the Roman core, like ancient toll booths without the fees. You reach the edge of a newly paved plaza, one of Augustus's passion projects. Its centerpiece, a massive bronze map of the empire etched into stone, showing all roads leading to Rome. And not just straight lines, curves, meanders, intersections. You step onto the map. Your foot lands on a junction marked in Gaul. A spiral symbol is carved nearby, maybe decorative, maybe not. You crouch to look closer and hear someone approach. "Beautiful, isn't it?" says a voice. You turn. A man in a worn toga, eyes sharp, despite the sweat beading on his brow. They say he dreamed of a city where traffic didn't snarl, where people flowed like water. You ask who? The man chuckles. The emperor. Who else? He sits beside you, producing a small scroll. On it, diagrams. Not maps, patterns. Arrows bending lanes, converging. You recognize them instantly. The early skeleton of what we'd now call traffic circles. Historians still argue whether he meant them literally, the man says, or if it was just imperial poetry. Movement as metaphor. You don't answer. You're too focused on a particular sketch, a large plaza with a fountain in the middle, 5 streets feeding into it. Arrows show carts, yielding flowing, exiting smoothly. It's elegant, almost modern. You ask, did anyone build this? He shrugs, not yet, but the city listens slowly. It's true. You feel it in the stone beneath you. Rome was always slow to adopt anything that didn't involve marble statues or excessive feathers. But when it moved, it really moved. You part ways with the thinker and head down a gentle slope where carts are forced to arc slightly to avoid a shrine. You watch how the curve eases tension, how the turn creates space. Another accidental design. Another quiet win. You pass a row of insulated apartment buildings where people shout across balconies like birds in a rookery. Laundry lines creak under the weight of tunics. Children race across rooftop boards, chasing a ball made of bundled rags. You duck under one dangling sheet and find yourself in another plaza, circular again. These little circles are everywhere if you know where to look. There's a bakery on one end, a bathhouse on the other. In between, foot traffic loops effortlessly. You stand in the middle like a statue, letting the motion eddy around you. Here for once, no one crashes. No one yells. A woman balancing a basket on her head hums as she walks. 2 vendors exchange coin with a nod. Even the dog dozing in the shade seems impressed. You sit beside the fountain and watch the late sun strike the rippling water. The air smells like rosemary and warm stone. The city hums softly, not in protest, in rhythm. And you think again of Augustus, not the conqueror, not the emperor, but the man who looked at this chaos and said, "We can do better." Maybe he didn't invent the roundabout, but he surely nudged Rome closer to needing it, wanting it, accepting it. Maybe that's all it takes. You linger beside the fountain longer than expected. The water murmurs in its shallow basin, a soothing loop that mimics the flow of the foot traffic swirling around it. The sun sinks slightly, painting everything in soft ochre and bronze. You blink slowly, body heavy, mind wandering. Then a distant shout breaks the spell. Make way. Civil engineers coming through. You raise an eyebrow. Down the narrow street comes a small procession, no priests or nobles this time. Just dusty men in plain tunics carrying scrolls, wax tablets, measuring ropes, and what looks like a very tired donkey hauling surveying equipment. You flatten against the nearest wall and watch them pass. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with ink stains on his fingers, stops in the middle of the plaza. He twirls slowly, nods to himself, then barks at the others to start measuring distances between entrances. You recognize that look. It's the same look your uncle gets when he's about to rearrange the kitchen. Turns out this plaza is about to get a makeover. You sidle up to one of the engineer's young freckled looks like he skipped his nap and casually ask what's happening. Trial design, he mutters. Circular market space, easier movement, less clogging. You nod like you understand. Because you do. The whisper of a roundabout born not from law, but from frustration. Mainstream historical fact. Vitruvius, the famed Roman architect and engineer, wrote extensively about the importance of urban planning, including the alignment of roads, airflow, and citizen movement. Though he never described a traffic circle per se, his principles hinted at flow-based design long before the term existed. The young engineer gestures with a stylus toward his wax tablet. You peer over his shoulder. The sketch is crude but unmistakable. 5 street arms, 1 central circle, and arrows guiding movement clockwise. You blink, then grin. Of course, clockwise, the engineer says without looking up. No one wants to go left in a cart. He's not wrong. You wander back through the growing crowd as more curious locals gather. Some grumble about change. Others squint at the diagrams like they're ancient spells. But one old woman mutters, "At least the cheese cart won't tip again," and that seems to win some hearts. You continue south through the city, letting your feet carry you toward the river. The Tiber winds lazily past old warehouses and broken docks, and the city's pulse softens here. Fewer carts, more boats. Rome's other highway. You cross a bridge, stone arches old enough to remember republics, and pause midway to watch a barge float past. It's loaded with amphora, each painted with symbols for wine, olive oil, or fish sauce. No wheels, no grooves, just gliding. Funny how water got it right first. On the other side, the city rises again, curving gently uphill. You follow the slope into a neighborhood known for artisans, glass blowers, potters, and a particularly loud group of paper makers arguing about wax seal durability. Here, the streets are narrower, more tangled, but still, you spot something open. Courtyards between buildings connected by arched alleyways. You wander into one. It's small and round with smooth stone paving and 3 curved benches circling a dry fountain. You sit, listen, watch. Even here, carts enter from one side and exit from another. Pedestrians weave naturally around the center. It's unspoken but understood. The circle works. Historians still argue whether these circular courtyards were intentionally designed for traffic relief or simply aesthetic retreats, but the behavior they encouraged, flow detour calm, mirrored what we now engineer with roundabouts. Sometimes a design doesn't need an intention. It just needs time. You rise again and follow the sound of hammering. A temple renovation is underway, scaffolding, wrapped around tall columns like a skeleton in progress. Workers shout over pulleys and ropes. Below, a foreman draws diagrams in the dust. For his team, one of them curved a sweeping semicircle with lines branching out. You step closer. Processional path, he tells you, wiping sweat from his brow. Avoids crowding during festivals. Keeps everyone moving. Another circle. Another ancient, mind-sketching flow, not blockage. You're starting to think roundabouts weren't invented. They were discovered, like the wheel itself. Quirky, fact Romans often built their city gates with slight curves to prevent straight-line entry both for defensive purposes and to naturally slow traffic. Not for traffic efficiency, more like a side bonus to their fortress logic. By now, the light is slanting golden across the rooftops. You pass a bakery setting out leftover bread for the poor. A musician tunes a lyre near a stoop. Children draw spirals in the dust, their fingers tracing lazy orbits as their parents chat nearby. The spirals catch your eye. They mimic the fountain plaza, the temple plan, the engineer's diagram. Rome might be built on straight roads and sharp corners, but its heart beats in curves. You turn one last corner and find yourself on a gentle slope overlooking a large public square. A temporary stage has been set up for some evening performance, but what grabs your attention isn't the musicians or the lights. It's the traffic. 5 roads feed into the square. Carts, pedestrians, vendors. And yet they move clockwise, loosely circling the central monument and peeling off as needed. There's no signage, no law, just consensus. A man on the edge of the crowd catches your gaze. You see it too, he asks. You nod. Started a year ago, he says. No idea how. But it works. Even the goats go with it now. He gestures toward a pair of goats calmly pacing the flow. You smile. Because if Rome's goats have accepted the traffic loop, then truly anything is possible. You stand there a moment longer, letting the spiral of motion fill your mind like a lullaby. The circle is no longer a theory or a sketch. It's here. It's ancient. It's evolving. Rome didn't invent the roundabout with trumpets and scrolls. It nudged it forward with goat carts bored engineers and tired emperors who just wanted fewer crashes outside their windows. And you, dear traveler, have seen its earliest turns. The square begins to fill with music as twilight sets in a slow, lilting rhythm from reed pipes and hand drums. People settle on steps and benches. Children tug at sleeves. A vendor circulates with warm nuts wrapped in parchment. The air smells of cumin and candle wax. You watch from a shaded portico, letting the moment soak into your bones like warm bathwater. The carts are gone now. Day traffic gave way to footfall and flickering torchlight. But the loop around the central monument remains. Even in the absence of movement, you can still feel it. The shape, the intent, the echo of a traffic idea just beginning to take hold. Someone beside you clears their throat. An older man robes crisp, despite the heat balances a scroll on his knee. Funny, isn't it, he says, how long it takes for cities to learn how to breathe. You glance at him. Streets are lungs, he continues, but we keep choking them with pride. You think back to the gridlocked alleys near the Forum Boreum, to the Appian ruts, to the elbow-locked courtyards of Subura. He's right. Rome, for all its grandeur, often built for spectacle, not flow. Mainstream historical fact. Many of Rome's grand roads were designed to impress visiting dignitaries, not to accommodate local traffic. Ceremonial processions trumped daily commutes, and design followed imperial ego more than citizen need. You look back at the impromptu roundabout in the square, this unintentional loop that now moves people without resistance. It's modest, efficient, completely accidental, and yet it works. You start walking again back toward the center of the city, letting torchlight lead your steps. The nighttime Rome is a different world, quieter, but no less alive. Merchants, close stalls, bathhouses empty, and carts begin to rumble into the city under cover of legal darkness. That's right. This is the allowed time for delivery carts to return. Remember Caesar's rule. No carts during daylight hours unless for official business. That law still applies. So now, under a crescent moon, the real vehicular chaos resumes. You watch one such convoy pass a trio of grain carts led by half-awake drivers and wholly alert donkeys. Their wheels squeak. One cart leaks flour trailing a white ribbon down the cobblestones. A dog follows hopeful. The city has rhythms you realize. Not just sounds, but pulses. Push and pull. Day to night. Pedestrian to cart. Noise to hush. It's not so different from the curves you've seen. Rome breathes in circles even when its roads are straight. You turn a corner and nearly collide with a pair of civil guards, their red sashes catching the torchlight. One holds a wax tablet ticking off deliveries. Oil for the temple, he says. Bricks for the bathhouse. 3 amphorae of wine for, well, it's labeled as medicinal. You keep walking. Ahead, a small crowd has gathered near a crossroads. Someone's dropped a barrel of olives again, and the spill has created a log jam. 2 carts can't pass. One tries to reverse only to get wedged against a fruit stall. The shouting begins, but then something remarkable. A young boy from a nearby doorway steps forward, eyes sharp. He points to the left. Loop around, he calls. Take the plaza and re-enter. The driver squints, then shrugs, backs out slowly and redirects his cart toward the circular plaza you just came from. The second driver follows. Within moments, the jam dissolves. No statues, no edicts, no scrolls with imperial seals, just someone noticing, someone remembering the curve. You wander toward the edge of the Tiber again, this time heading north. The river murmurs beside you as constant and circular as ever. A fisherman rows silently past his net, glowing with the last bits of daylight. Beyond him, in the distance, the dome of a temple glints silvered serene. Quirky fact. In some Roman temples, circular layouts were used intentionally to evoke a sense of cosmic order. The Pantheon itself, though later in date, is the ultimate architectural circle, a reminder that Romans respected curves, even if they didn't always think of them in traffic terms. You find another curved courtyard, smaller, more intimate. A fig tree bends toward a small stone bench, and beside it, carved into the wall, is a fading spiral. Possibly graffiti, possibly art. You sit there and imagine what Rome could be if every turn had a purpose. Nearby, an old man sketches on the ground with a bit of charcoal. You approach, trying something. He says not looking up. Chariots don't like corners. Thought maybe, if they had more room, they'd stop crashing. He draws a wide loop, then 3 spokes feeding into it. Like a racing track, he mutters. But slow. You ask his name. He doesn't answer, just smiles. Historians still argue whether ancient thinkers like this ever formally proposed circular traffic mechanisms. Most records, if they existed, are lost. But evidence lingers in the stones, in the patterns, in the wear marks, left by wheels that learned slowly to curve. You rise, nod, and walk away. And then, just before heading home, you see it another loop, this one near the gates. 4 roads meet, and someone, perhaps many someones, have begun using the central plaza to navigate. You count 6 carts. No one stops. No one crashes. They just move. The goats, as usual, are unimpressed. The stars emerge slowly above Rome, pricking through the velvet blue of evening, one by one, like lanterns hung by a god with steady hands. You walk in their glow, the streets now calmer, quieter, but never still. Rome doesn't sleep. It rustles. You head east into the remnants of Pompeii's influence. Not the doomed city itself, of course, but the neighborhoods of Rome shaped by its ideas. After all, Pompeii was not just a tragedy, it was a laboratory. Before it vanished under ash, it showed the world what a well-designed small city could look like. You step into a side street and immediately notice something odd. The sidewalks are raised, significantly. 3 thick stepping stones span the width of the road, creating a kind of makeshift crosswalk high enough to keep your sandals clean-spaced just right for the average Roman cart's axle width. You walk across and smile. It works. Mainstream historical fact. Pompeii's city planners used raised stepping stones to create pedestrian zones without halting carts. The spaces between stones allowed wheels to pass, but forced drivers to slow down an early form of speed bump. You watch a vegetable cart carefully align its wheels with the gaps. No jolts, no spills. Just a gentle sway and onward motion. That's traffic calming Roman style. Around the corner, you find another trick corner fountains. Not just pretty decorations, they serve a real purpose. Drivers steer wide to avoid splashing them, creating a soft curve in the road, a near roundabout in miniature. And those water troughs, perfect detours. You step back as a young man guides his donkey cart in a clean half-circle, around one never needing to stop. The curve was not planned for traffic, but it ended up doing the job anyway. You pause near a small tavern, drawn by laughter and the clink of ceramic cups. Inside, a group of men argue over something sketched on a wine-stained tablet. You lean closer. If carts go left, we get jammed, says one, but clockwise. Like at the Temple Plaza. Someone else snorts. That's only because the fishmonger finally stopped blocking the south entrance. You chuckle. Even among wine-sticky tables and stale barley cakes, Rome debates traffic. You leave them to it and head down a gently arcing street. You can tell it was never meant to be straight. The buildings follow the bend like petals folding around a bud. The effect, fewer blind corners, fewer crashes. Historians still argue whether these curves were intentional or just the result of awkward land plots. But the outcome speaks for itself. The streets here breathe. You reach a small shrine at the next corner, a rounded alcove with a statue of Mercury, god of travelers. Offerings lie at his feet, a crust of bread, a sprig of laurel, a tiny bronze wheel. You raise an eyebrow at that one. Some commuter with a sense of humor, perhaps. A priestess sits nearby, eyes closed in evening prayer. You ask softly if the wheel is hers. No, she replies, without opening her eyes. But I approve. You nod and move on feet, instinctively tracing the arc of the street. Quirky fact. In some parts of Pompeii and smaller Roman towns, circular plazas were intentionally built as social hubs, not just to gather people, but to manage how they moved through space. These became informal flow centers balancing foot traffic, vendors, and deliveries. You walk into one such plaza now. It's small, maybe 20 paces across, but perfectly round. 4 roads feed into it. A musician strums a cithara nearby, adding to the hypnotic charm. Here, carts don't rush. They enter slowly, scan the movement, merge gently, and leave. It's like water around a stone. Even the donkey seems proud of its composure. And again, you see it, a pattern, a possibility. Not just accident, but practice. You sit on the fountain edge and watch for a while. One driver gives a friendly nod to another. A group of students pass in a spiral laughing. A vendor slides his wheelbarrow into the flow, is waved through, and vanishes down the east road. You remember Pompeii's streets narrow, clever, flexible. Its loops, curves, and interruptions were lessons. And here in Rome, you see echoes of them slowly taking hold. You rise and begin wandering west again. The lamps now glow with thick oil, casting everything in amber and umber. The city feels older at night, as if its marble bones remember Etruscan times when chariots clattered over dirt tracks, and no one cared about right-of-way. Now they care, or at least they pretend to. You reach another intersection, this one clogged again. 2 carts try to pass at once, neither willing to yield. The drivers argue. Back up. No, you back up. Then someone suggests loop around the Forum. It's faster. It's working. Not perfectly, not always, but enough. The habit is forming. The muscle memory is taking root. You veer left down a merchant road where the curve of the buildings steers traffic away from the temples. Not by law, but by logic. The road learned to shape itself. You pass a pair of children playing with clay toys. One pushes a disc. The other places pebbles like a round fence. Their game is nonsense, but the motion is right. You watch them, their fingers mimicking the rhythm of carts and curves over and over again. You smile. Rome will keep stumbling. Its leaders will posture. Its streets will clog and clear again. But somewhere slowly, inevitably, the loop becomes habit. Then expectation. Then law. The roundabout is coming. Not with fanfare, but with footsteps. With donkey wheels. With whispered ideas passed over tavern wine and temple steps. You yawn and lean against a warm stone wall, eyelids heavy. The traffic of history moves slowly but steadily, and always, always it circles back. The night deepens, wrapping the city in the soft hush of sleep and soot. Rome exhales. The torches burn lower. Most of the noise now comes from rolling carts slipping through the gaps, left by retreating foot traffic, their iron-clad wheels murmuring like distant thunder on stone. You're following one of those carts, not intentionally, just magnetized by its soft rhythm. Its driver hums under his breath. His cargo is unremarkable amphorae, stacked in straw bound by rope, rocking gently with each turn. But it's not the cart itself that holds your attention. It's the way it moves. The street curves slightly flanked by tightly packed shops. The cart leans gently into the bend, its wheels riding ruts so familiar the driver barely steers. You see how naturally he moves around a public well. No sharp turns, no stopping, no chaos. Just one smooth arc. Mainstream historical fact. Roman urban wells and fountains were often placed in central junctions or open courtyards ostensibly for public access. But their placement often encouraged carts and foot traffic to move around them, guiding flow long before traffic circles were a concept. You round the same corner and notice a set of grooves, wheel-worn, shallow, but undeniably circular. Not a full loop, not yet, but the seeds of one, a motion becoming memory. It's no coincidence. You continue on foot through a district where wheelwrights work by moonlight, their hammers tapping like distant heartbeats. Men bend over frames, fitting bronze to oak, testing width against stone templates on the ground. You hear one mutter, "Too wide for the Appian line." He adjusts without fanfare. Standardization, quiet, subtle, but it's happening. Historians still argue whether these ruts and wheel measurements reflect intentional urban planning or mere convenience. But when everyone starts following the same tracks, chaos becomes choreography. You pass a bakery with an open window. Warm air rushes out full of anise and barley. Inside, a woman kneads dough as her son sketches with a charcoal nub on a flour sack. You glance down and catch its circles, overlapping loops. He presses his thumb into the center of one. "Wheels," he says, simply meeting your gaze. Then goes back to drawing. You walk a bit further and hear two men arguing near a warehouse gate. If we place the barrels, their carts can't loop. They're not supposed to loop. They're going to do it anyway. A pause. Fine. We'll shift them by dawn. You turn the corner and smile. Another little victory. Not for law, not for command, but for the loop. A wide plaza opens ahead. You've been here before, just not at night. During the day, it's market mayhem. Now, it's almost holy. A torch flickers at each street mouth, feeding into the space. 5 roads, 1 circle. Silent carts pass through, each guided by the collective memory of a city learning how to turn. You sit at the fountain's edge, watching them spiral in then out like a living diagram. A scholar leans against a nearby column, scribbling by lamplight. You ask what he's working on. "Geometry," he says. "But lately, I've been watching the carts instead." You raise an eyebrow. "Everything returns," he muses, staring at a looping vehicle. "Even accidents. Eventually, someone draws a lesson from them." You ask him whether he thinks Rome will build more loops. "Not officially," he says. "Not yet. Too many egos, too many statues in the way. But the people they already have." He scratches a spiral into the dust with his sandal. Movement shapes memory. Memory shapes habit. And habit reshapes cities. You nod, then walk on. Your path takes you downhill towards the eastern fringes of Rome, an area still being built, carved into shape by teams of laborers and engineers. You pass piles of limestone sand mounds and toolboxes wrapped in leather. One work crew sits by a fire eating dried figs and debating road alignment. Their plans are spread on the ground, straight lines mostly. But one corner a curve, broad and deliberate. You point at it. "Drainage 1, says, between bites. "Safety," says another. "We had too many wagons tipping." And then the youngest among them shrugs. Also, it just works. You leave them to their meal and stroll down the newly laid road. It's not finished, but already the curve guides you gently around a half-built shrine. You imagine it filled with carts years from now, each one bending instinctively, never realizing they're part of something older than themselves. Quirky fact. In later Roman provinces, especially in Britain and Gaul, some town centers were built with circular plazas where 5 or 6 roads converged. Some were marketplaces, others spiritual centers, but all of them enforced circular movement by design or tradition. You reach a small bridge, crossing a dry gully. On the other side is a dusty path, flanked by columns, old ones, mismatched, likely salvaged. But they mark a curve. A broken loop once meant to circle a shrine, long lost to time. You step into the loop. The dust swirls around your feet. Even ruined it holds form. The roundabout may not yet be law, but it has roots in fountains, in wells, in broken temples, in olive carts and gossip, in ruts and rhythms, in sketchbooks and scoldings. It is a thing whispered by the city's stones long before the Senate gives it a name. Rome doesn't invent the roundabout the way it builds aqueducts or bathhouses. It grows it, quietly, organically, tire by tire, turn by turn. You stop to rest under a fig tree, just as bells in the distance mark the final watch. The city hums, turns, waits. You wake barely on that bench beneath the fig tree, blinking into the pre-dawn hush where shadows lie thick and cool across the streets. Rome is not yet awake, but it breathes. It always breathes. You rise slowly, joints creaking like old wagon wheels, and begin to walk toward the heart of the city. The sky above is a canvas of pale lavender and faint gold, as if the gods themselves have begun their morning shift with soft brushes and quieter intentions. As you cross into a wealthier quarter, you notice how the buildings open wider, how the streets, previously tight as tunic sleeves, now broaden into gently arcing boulevards. It's not just space, it's strategy. Here, even the elite have started to see the benefit of movement. Mainstream historical fact. By the late Empire, urban planners began integrating circular plazas and arcaded walkways into city renovations, especially in provincial capitals. Though primarily aesthetic, these features shaped pedestrian and cart traffic in ways more structured than their early Republican ancestors. You pass a domus with a wide, semicircular forecourt, its fountain shaped like a coiled dolphin. Two servants sweep leaves in rhythmic arcs, moving not away from the fountain, but around it. You note their path without judgment. You're simply collecting patterns now. At the end of the road, you turn into a square, where an amphora merchant arranges his wares into perfect concentric circles. For beauty, maybe. Or maybe because he knows his clients will circle the display like cautious bees around a hive. A senator's litter passes nearby the bearers, sidestepping gracefully to accommodate a delivery cart that veers clockwise around a parked wagon. No words exchanged, just practiced movement, just memory. Even here, among marble and mosaic, among politics and posture, the roundabout spirit rolls on. You hear murmuring from a nearby bathhouse. Curiosity nudges you through its marble arch and into the atrium, where a group of men soak in tepid water and argue over civic layouts. One gestures with a sponge. I'm telling you, he says we need a circular drop-off zone near the basilica. Right now, it's chaos. Another scoffs. You just want a shortcut for your wine deliveries. Exactly. And smoother traffic, fewer spills. You leave them to their warm water and warmer tempers. You've heard their conversation before in a tavern, a forum, a fruit stall. The details shift, but the rhythm remains. Circular logic, if you'll pardon the pun, always floats back. Quirky fact. Roman engineers sometimes shaped entire public spaces around pre-existing circular temples or natural features, creating flow patterns that over time taught citizens to navigate the city in loops rather than direct lines. Infrastructure didn't follow rules, it taught them. You emerge into a market, preparing to open. Crates are being stacked, awnings pulled into place. You watch a fish vendor direct two carts through a wide sweep around her stall. Clockwise, she shouts, wagging a sardine for emphasis. don't be creative. You make your way to a nearby temple plaza, one you've passed before, but today something is different. The paving stones have been scrubbed clean. 2 torches flicker low at either end. And in the middle, a painted symbol glistens faintly arrows curving around a central circle. You blink, approach, crouch. It's crude, probably temporary, but it's official. A guard nearby confirms it. Trial loop, he says, for deliveries. If it works more to follow, you suppress a grin. You move on, meandering into a residential zone, just waking up. Laundry lines sag between rooftops. Birds flutter into courtyards, and street sweepers whistle through crooked teeth. You pause at a junction where 3 roads meet, 2 of them curved. No fountain. No shrine. Just a single potted tree in the center, placed there by someone, perhaps no one official. But it works. 2 carts pass each other smoothly on either side. You're witnessing design without decree. You reach a hill and climb slowly, winding through switchback lanes that spiral towards the summit like a snail's shell. At the top, Trajan's Forum. Grand, vast, quiet this early. The columns cast long shadows. You walk its edges, eyes scanning the patterns carved into the marble, paving the traces of movement etched by time and sandaled feet. Mainstream historical fact. Trajan's Forum was designed with open ellipses and broad turning arcs for ceremonial movement processions and military parades. These spaces, though symbolic, trained citizens to think in curves, to walk and move, with rhythm and yield. You settle near the forum's edge, just beside an arch, where carts once entered in celebration. You sip from a clay flask. Your breath fogs faintly. The city below stirs like a slow animal. You watch as merchants arrive at the lower plaza, pulling carts in graceful, practiced loops, entering from one road, circling gently, and exiting through another. There are no signs, no guards, just understanding. It's happening, not because Rome declared it, but because Rome felt it. Because water doesn't crash, it flows. Because goats don't pivot, they meander. Because even cities need to stop pushing and start spinning. Someone behind you clears their throat. You turn. A woman, older, with a satchel full of tablets, smiles. "I saw you yesterday," she says. "Watching the carts." You nod. "I've been tracking the flows," she adds, tapping the satchel. It's like watching stars find orbits. You raise an eyebrow. "Chaos wants order," she says. And sometimes that order is a circle. Then she turns and descends the hill sandals, whispering against stone, disappearing into the awakening maze below. You sit a little longer, staring out over Rome. There are no fireworks, no edicts carved in bronze, no parades in honor of this quiet revolution. But it's real. The roundabout has begun not as invention, but as instinct, as behavior, as survival. And you were there to see it, to feel it take its first sleepy spin. The sun climbs higher now, slicing Rome into ribbons of warm light and long, leaning shadows. You descend Trajan's Hill and move toward the temple districts, the smell of incense already thick in the air. The city wakes fully, and the rhythm you've watched slowly bloom into loops and spirals finds another home, the courtyards. Temple courtyards, to be exact. Those wide, sacred, open spaces nestled between columns and gods where worshippers gather and carts most definitely should not enter. Yet somehow always do. You step into one now, pausing beneath the portico of the Temple of Juno Regina. The floor is worn from centuries of feet, and carts have clearly been here blackened. Ruts skirt the outer edge, forming a ghostly ring just outside the central altar's reach. Mainstream historical fact. Temple courtyards were often the largest open spaces in Roman cities, besides forums. Though primarily religious in function, they frequently doubled as unofficial meeting areas, emergency shelters, and, yes, even maneuvering zones for overflow traffic during festivals. You sit on a low bench and watch. Vendors set up at the perimeter, careful not to cross the sacred boundary. One cart arrives, sees the crowd, and without prompting loops around the courtyard's edge in a smooth, circular arc before retreating the way it came. No honking, no yelling, just instinct. At another corner, a priest directs foot traffic with a subtle tilt of the hand. He isn't barking commands. He's orchestrating a conductor of sandals and sacrifice. And suddenly, it clicks. These courtyards are more than temples. They're proto-hubs, roundabout ancestors masked in incense and myth. You walk east, passing several more temples with similar behavior. In each, the flow gently bends. The presence of the divine seems to demand it don't cut through, go around. Even carts obey. You pass a shrine to Minerva. Its plaza is small, the centerpiece a round fountain encircled by columns. But again, 4 streets converge on it, and again the traffic yields. A fish cart pauses, waits for a fig vendor to exit, then slides into the flow like a boat joining a stream. You linger beside the fountain, tracing a finger along its rim. Water splashes predictably in circles. You feel the metaphor hardening into architecture. Quirky fact. Many Roman temples were built atop older pre-Roman circular sanctuaries, especially in the countryside. These round, sacred spaces sometimes left spatial legacies long after the original structures disappeared, forming the centerpieces of road networks and rural traffic convergence. You continue through the winding streets, past bathhouses and libraries, until you reach a more chaotic space, the meat market near the Caelian Hill. It's loud, ripe with smell, and packed with carts. But even here the chaos coils into pattern. A recent addition, a round stone platform, once meant for announcements, has been quietly adopted as a traffic center. Carts loop around it to avoid the central jam. No one planned it. But now, everyone follows it. You approach a butcher taking a break on the platform's edge, chewing olives like a man with too few teeth and too many opinions. Used to be worse, he says, gesturing at the swirling traffic. We'd get 3 carts stuck sideways and spend half the day yelling. Then some kids started circling this thing. We laughed. Then we joined. You ask if he thinks it'll last. If the goats keep cooperating, he says, grinning. Sure. You leave him to his snack and wind toward the theater district. It's midday now, and Rome's energy shifts again. Traffic thickens. People press into lanes, carts multiply. But still, the round shapes persist. Near the theater of Marcellus, you spot a street performer juggling clay plates in the center of a wide, circular plaza. He's not the only one drawing attention. The traffic bends around him gently, unconsciously. He isn't in the way. He is the center. You pause to watch. A young girl sits beside you, munching a fig eyes, fixed on the spinner. Why don't they just go straight through, you ask her? Because he's in the middle, she says plainly. Simple as that. You walk further, ending up near a complex of storehouses. Here, movement is brisk, businesslike. Crates are loaded, logs are rolled. But the paths laid out in curves, partial rings that feed into central zones and peel off again. Not for beauty, for efficiency. You talk to a foreman sunburned and hoarse. Straight paths jam, he rasps. Curves keep things flowing. Got the idea from the olive press, actually. You ask if the city approved the design. He laughs so hard he coughs. You think I asked. That night, as you walk home, the city glows golden under lamplight. The courtyards, plazas, and temple loops whisper together in quiet unison. You watch the movement. You feel it now, how Rome is learning to spin, to yield, to breathe. Not because of orders, because it works. Because every torchlit cart that rounds a plaza, without halting, teaches the next one to do the same. Because priests gesture in arcs. Because fountains are round. Because temples curve. And because movement once patterned is almost impossible to unlearn. The roundabout is not theory anymore. It is memory. Dawn again. The city stirs with a groan and a stretch. You're up before the full clangor begins, before shouting vendors, before fruit carts clatter down cobbled lanes, before the sun fully pierces the veil of rooftop smoke and temple haze. You walk the Via Sacra Due, still clinging to the stones, and watch the city come to life, like a massive, sleepy animal. And this morning, you're looking for something very specific, the signs. Not omens, not prophecies, literal signs, Roman ones. You stop beneath an arch where a slab of marble has been nailed crudely to the wall. It bears a hand-painted instruction in ochre ink. No wagons between this mark and the basilica, midday to dusk. You squint. Below it, someone has scrawled in charcoal, unless you're quick. Classic, mainstream, historical fact. By the early imperial period, Rome began experimenting with actual signage, for traffic stone markers, painted tiles, and even guards assigned to reroute wagons during specific hours. While never systematized citywide, some areas developed functional, if informal, navigational norms. You turn into a narrow alley and nearly bump into a man painting something directly onto a paving stone. He has a pot of thin black pitch and a brush made from reeds. He's painting an arrow not pointing straight ahead, but in a slow, curling arc. He notices you watching. They keep crashing carts at the corner, he mutters. Boss says we try this. You ask, does it help? He shrugs. Doesn't hurt. You walk on. The air smells like warm plaster and fig paste. The city's always building something, fixing. Something changing shape without fanfare. You pass another street where small oil lamps have been mounted on posts. Not for beauty. These are for navigation. The lamps are staggered in a crescent pattern, leading carts along a curve rather than into the clogged chaos of the next junction. You catch up to a delivery driver squinting up at the lamps. New, you ask. He nods. Helps after the 5th jug of wine. Fair. You watch him follow the curve, steering gently left where once he might have gone straight and stuck. The light told him what to do. No shouting, no signage, just guidance. Quiet, glowing persuasion. You wind north toward the Esquiline Hill, where carts have always had trouble, too steep, too narrow, too many temples in the way. And yet even here, you begin to notice the city folding in on itself. Not geometrically, behaviorally. The curve has become expected. One driver pulls his mule tight and banks left without hesitation. Another slows, waits, and then spirals into motion. You hear fewer arguments, fewer crashes, and even the pigeons seem marginally less annoyed. Quirky fact. In some inscriptions discovered in Roman provinces, scholars have noted brief notations that describe cart routes in loops. Phrases like pass the shrine and circle back or turn around the garden before entering the gate. While subtle, They show a language of movement, slowly turning from linear to rotational. You pause near a grain mill where 3 carts wait their turn. The loading area is curved semicircular, with room for each cart to exit in a loop rather than reversing. You realize you haven't seen anyone back a cart all morning. Why? Because they don't have to. You sidle up to the mill overseer, who points proudly at the layout. Borrowed the idea from the fish market, he says. They circle around a barrel. I just made the barrel bigger. Function over design. And yet, it works. You pass a public message board next. Nothing official, just wax tablets hanging on hooks. People post notices, lost items, marriage requests, complaints about stolen sandals. One tablet catches your eye. It reads, if you're heading to the woolyard loop around the shrine of Bologna, traffic's better that way. You grin. Advice, not command. But shared wisdom travels fast in a city like Rome. And speaking of travel, you find yourself near the Porta Capena, the city gate, most known for long-haul trade. The area bustles with caravans, wagons, and every kind of cart imaginable, stacked with pots, grain fabrics, and the occasional squawking bird. But even here among the caravans and chaos, you see it again, the flow. A large round water trough has become an unofficial loop. Carts veer around it before exiting. No one talks about it. No one manages it. They just do it. You ask one merchant if there's a rule. Nope, he says, but we lose fewer jars this way. Simplicity wins. Mainstream historical fact. Roman cart drivers often created their own routes and rules based on lived experience rather than imperial orders. Over time, these habits solidified into local traditions, many of which prefigured more formal urban planning centuries later. You take one last turn toward a quieter district, where the cobbles are older, the walls more worn. Here, near the city's fringe, you spot a peculiar sight, a circle of stones embedded in the pavement, low, subtle, and well-trodden. A child skips across them. A cat naps in the center. But as you watch, you realize every cart that passes curves neatly around the circle without fail. There is no sign. There is no instruction. But there is unmistakably a rule. Not written, not enforced, but remembered. The roundabout at last has no beginning, no origin scroll, no signature from Augustus, no divine decree. Only behavior, only habit, only Rome. It exists not because someone built it. It exists because people followed it, and because at some point they stopped needing to be told. Mid-morning now. The city is fully alive, buzzing, steaming, arguing, haggling. The smell of garlic oil mingles with that of donkey sweat and fresh-cut marble. You've been walking for hours, but your legs don't feel it. You're carried forward by rhythm now, by the loop. Then suddenly you hear it. Not the usual clatter of carts, nor the grumble of tired mules. It's laughter. From a street corner not far from the Forum of Nerva, a group of young scribes sits in a circle, scrolls, unrolled wine cups in hand, pointing at a ridiculous sketch etched into the dirt. You move closer. There it is, a chariot with one wheel some kind of joke drawing. The wheel is dead center, while the driver balances like a panicked acrobat, arms flailing. And then, he said it worked better than 2 wheels. One scribe hoots, nearly dropping his cup. You raise an eyebrow. The infamous one-wheeled chariot scandal. Quirky, yes, but real possibly. Quirky fact. Ancient records, scant and satirical, describe at least one attempt to create a central axis chariot which promised faster turning, and narrower passage through Rome's cramped roads. It failed spectacularly, tipping often terrifying mules and once allegedly destroying a cheese stall near the Aventine. The scribes dissolve into giggles. Historians still argue whether it was satire or serious, one says. But either way, it got banned after 3 days. You glance down at the drawing again. Despite the absurdity, there's something poignant about it. How even failure in traffic design becomes part of the story. You wander away from their laughter down a quieter lane, where cracked marble glints in midday sun. The road forks. One path leads straight toward the bath's clogged always. The other curves right around a statue of Ceres. No sign tells you what to do. You curve. So do 3 carts behind you. One pauses, then follows. The statue. It isn't just art. It's a pivot point. A gentle stone command to yield. This, you realize, is the secret. No one writes down. Successful traffic design isn't just about engineering. It's about suggestion, about habit, about nudging people toward movement that feels good. You pass a storefront where a potter arranges his vases in spirals. He explains that customers walk more slowly through curved aisles. They spend longer, he says, and they break fewer pots. You chuckle. Even merchants understand the psychology of the circle. Mainstream historical fact. Roman shops and markets often used curved counters or angled stalls to manage customer movement, long before retail psychology became a profession. People moved more fluidly when gently redirected. You walk further into a small walled plaza. 3 roads enter it, and all bend inward, following the contour of the central statue, a kneeling Mercury. The effect is subtle, but powerful. Carts never stop. They yield without pausing. You sit on a bench and marvel at the dance. A city official walks by, robed in pale blue, holding a tablet. You strike up a conversation. Do you track movement here, you ask. We observe it, he replies. And if it works, we leave it alone. You ask if he's ever proposed formal roundabouts. He smiles faintly. We don't name things we can't take credit for. You keep walking past the edge of the marketplace and toward the grain district. The streets tighten again, and noise returns. Here carts jostle and argue. Space is scarce, but once again, an oasis, a grain depot redesigned after a fire. Its new layout, circular entry. One-way cart flow. A loop. You talk to the architect spotted on site. Learned it from Alexandria, he says. They loop around wells. Fewer accidents. You ask if the Senate approved it. He grins. They haven't noticed. Historians still argue whether such circular depots were deliberate imports from Egypt or local inventions inspired by necessity. But the fact remains, they worked, and they spread. You pass 3 more depots with similar curves, then a shrine, then a school, each one wrapped in a loop. Not proclaimed, not enforced, just accepted. You rest beneath a fig tree again. Rome has so many fig trees, and from this one you watch another accidental roundabout emerge in real time. A cart gets stuck. A second arrives, then a third. No one panics. One peels off, takes the fountain route. The others follow. Within minutes, a circle forms. An informal loop around a bread stall and a lazy cat. And just like that, the snarl is gone. No orders, no signs, just memory. You yawn. The sun is hot on your shoulders. But you stay, because you're watching a miracle that doesn't call itself one. A city learning to breathe differently, quieter, smarter, rounder. The sun hovers at its peak. now casting sharp shadows across colonnades and warming every surface until Rome itself radiates heat. The stones beneath your sandals feel like oven tiles. Yet still, the city moves, tired, cranky, sweating, but never stopping. You take a slower path, wandering through a grove of plane trees planted long ago beside a minor aqueduct. It's shaded, blessedly quiet. You pass old men playing board games on carved tables, young mothers gossiping over baskets of herbs, a boy teaching a goose to turn left on command. It's not working, and that's when it hits you not a cart, thankfully, but a thought this moment, this motion has survived. You're not watching the start of a roundabout anymore. You're watching its persistence, mainstream historical fact. When the Roman Empire fractured in the 5th century CE, much of its urban structure collapsed, but certain patterns, particularly road layouts and civic habits, endured through local memory. Round plazas and circular road behavior are noted in medieval town plans across Europe, especially where Roman infrastructure had once been strongest. You pass into a quieter district one historians will one day call medieval, but here it's just sleepy and old. A few crumbling villas, a shuttered bathhouse, but at the center of it all, a circular, well plaza, worn and weathered. It's not elegant, it's not grand, but it's still used. 2 wagons arc around the center in that familiar clockwise spiral. A man hauling grain does it without thinking. You stop him. Why the curve, you ask? He shrugs. So I don't hit the well. Simple, effective, eternal. You take a winding road south through garden walls and olive presses down into the valleys where Rome's breath slows with the afternoon lull. You reach a small village once swallowed by Rome's expansion. It feels like time travels slower here, and yet they have a traffic loop. Dirt packed, marked by stones and habit. Not a roundabout by name, but certainly by function. You ask a local elder about it. Been turning left there since my grandfather's time, he says. He said it keeps the wagons from kissing too hard. Quirky fact. In medieval European towns built atop Roman sites, many round intersections were mistaken for pagan ritual spaces or former temples. In truth, they were just efficient traffic designs that nobody wanted to lose. You begin spotting more of them, these forgotten survivors. A circular patch of packed earth in a monastery courtyard. A looping path carved by feet through a grain field. A spiral water channel near a crumbled bridge. Rome fell, but its roundabouts didn't. They hid in behavior, in paths carved by repetition, in muscle memory passed from father to son, mule to mule cart to cart. You return to the city center as dusk approaches. The chaos begins again, vendors shouting sandals, slapping stone, someone dropping a crate of cabbages and yelling a curse inventive enough to make a priest blink. But amid the clamor, the loops hold. One plaza guides foot traffic with candlelight and instinct. A narrow arch forces carts to bend around a fountain. A shrine creates a vortex of movement no one dares challenge. You watch a young girl tug her father left, not right as they approach a crowded corner. Everyone goes that way, she says. No question, no debate, just truth. Historians still argue whether these loops were deliberate civic tools or emergent behaviors born of constant friction. But when a habit survives empire invasion and entropy, what else can you call it but design? You sit on a low wall outside a bakery, watching a baker sweep flour in curved motions, matching the path of carts circling her stall. Do they ever cut straight through, you ask? Only once, she says, tapping her broom on the ground. He broke a jug and scared the chickens. You don't ask again. Further down the road, a priest blesses a passing cart. The driver loops gently around a temporary altar. The priest doesn't flinch. He nods, approving the circle as holy or at least not offensive. And once more, you see it a city that never needed to announce the roundabout. It just needed to remember it. You pass one final fountain before twilight. Around it, 4 carts move in sequence. Not fast, not loud, but deliberate. It looks choreographed. It looks ancient. It looks permanent. No trumpet declared this law. No stone bore this rule. But Rome learned it anyway. Not through architecture, through living, through turning, through time. The light fades now. Not in a rush. Rome never does anything in a rush, but in slow glowing waves. Gold softens to rose. Rose drips into blue. Lamps flicker one by one along balconies under awnings beside worn archways. You move through the city like a ghost. But tonight, you're not alone. The roundabout is with you. It turns beneath your every step, in the paths others take, in the choices they no longer realize they're making. You turn into a residential square just as a child pulls a toy cart in a perfect arc around a dog sleeping in the middle of the street. The cart clatters. The dog snores. The loop holds. There is no instruction here, just intuition. You find yourself tracing the edge of a garden planted in an old colonnade. There's a statue of a long-forgotten minor deity in the middle, headless now. Ivy grows over his shoulders like a shawl. A path curves around him, not paved, just trodden. The people who live here made their own roundabout. Not because anyone told them to, but because it made life easier. Quirky fact. In Gaul and Iberia, archaeologists have unearthed post-Roman rural settlements with central stone circles worn smooth by centuries of foot and cart traffic, unmapped, unrecorded, but undeniably used. Rome's circulatory logic lived on even when its politics did not. You climb a gentle slope toward the Aventine. The lamps here glow soft yellow filtered through linen. Music carries from a rooftop, a lyre, a reed pipe, 2 voices softly harmonizing. You pass them without being seen, and then you reach it, the round plaza, the one with the fountain at its heart, the one where you first saw the loop form days ago, maybe years ago. Time spirals here too. Now it's crowded, not gridlocked, just alive. Carts circle with calm purpose. Children weave through gaps, mimicking the motion. A woman carries a basket balanced on her head and doesn't even glance left or right. She knows the rhythm. You sit on the rim of the fountain. It bubbles quietly. The water mirrors the motion around it. Round and round, never rushed, never still. Mainstream historical fact. The roundabout, as we know it today, wasn't formally introduced until the 20th century. But its spirit-controlled circular traffic movement was seeded thousands of years earlier, in places just like this. Not by name, by need. A temple bell tolls in the distance. It's late now. Rome softens around you. You close your eyes, listen. A cartwheel creaks. A donkey snorts. Footsteps spiral away. Everything turning. Everything in motion. Everything returning. Because Rome, for all its corners and columns, learned how to move in circles. And now, so have you. So now, as the last cart rounds the fountain and the lamps burn low, your mind settles like the dust on Roman stone. You've walked long paths tonight, not just through the city, but through time, through habit, through movement. It's strange how gentle the chaos became, how noisy streets softened into rhythm, how people without orders or signs found their way together, not by pushing forward, but by turning, yielding, looping. You remember the goats, the scribes, the boy drawing spirals in flour, the painted arrows, the wheeled fountains, the cart paths circling ancient wells. They weren't accidents. They were language. And now it's a lullaby. You feel it. Still the spiral of streets beneath your feet, the wheel-etched curves of memory guiding every step. The traffic never stopped. It just learned to breathe. So maybe that's the lesson. Not all inventions arrive with fanfare. Some drift in like habits. Some whisper instead of shout. And some just quietly endure century after century, waiting for you to notice. You lie back now, the sky above you dark, peppered with stars, once charted by men who walked these same stones. The fountain trickles beside you. A wheel rolls in the distance, and the roundabout turns still, endlessly, softly, exactly as it was always meant to.